Hello, everybody. So I am Ryann Williams, and I'm joined here today with Dr. Stone and Mr. Salcido. Dr. Stone is a professor at Trinity University in the Sociology department, and Robert Salcido is the executive director of the Pride Center in San Antonio, as well as the community outreach and engagement manager at Equality Texas. And so we're going to be having a conversation today in honor of June, and this is a conversation we should be having year round anyway, but how to foster a healthier and happier LGBTQ community in San Antonio and South Texas. Nationally, yeah, we're going to be talking pride, wellness, and action. And so, without further ado, would you guys like any more introductions for yourselves, or you want to jump into it?
Let's go ahead and jump right in.
Let's do it. Okay, so how did Pride start? Can we talk a little bit about the inception of Pride?
I am a bit of a history nerd. So I actually skimmed through the book I have on Pride before this started, but I often tell people that remind people the original Pride was a riot. That Pride was a celebration to remember both the riots at the Stonewall Inn in June 28th, 1969, which was a response to policing in Greenwich Village. At the time, gay bars across the country were often the subject of kind of strange policing practices and a lot of police brutality. They were often raided, and the people who were in them would be arrested, and often their names were put in the paper. They would lose their job, they would lose their relationships, they would be estranged from their parents the next day, right? There were some real severe consequences for these raids.
Right.
And the Stonewall Inn, that the police were trying to do that night. And instead of just submitting to that, they protested. They said, we're not going to take this, right? And they rioted for several days. And it was actually one of several riots happening at that time. So there's a lot of rioting going on at that time in history all across the country. And there had been riots at other gay bars, like Compton's Cafeteria riots in San Francisco a few years before, right? Which was Compton's Cafeteria was not a bar, but it was a place where transgender people hung out on a regular basis. And they were kicked out of the bar or out of the cafeteria. And the police were involved and they protested and rioted, right? So it was sort of part of this moment in time in which people were taken to the streets to make change, and to make change particularly around sexuality, gender, and race in the US, and particularly in response to a lot of police actions.
Right, absolutely.
I think also just to add on there, and I think Amy definitely from the historical perspective hit it the nail, but I think even more so as I start thinking about Pride and Pride itself, this year, given everything that's going on with COVID and everything that's in society that's happening, the overall overarching kind of theme that people were saying is Pride is canceled. And one, I found that disheartening because Pride is not canceled. Pride is very much alive. Pride is alive in us 365 days a year. This is the thing. But when we talk about like the actual physical Pride itself, or the Pride March, or the Pride riot and the protests, yes, that's when it began. But the history of Pride and us being prideful of who we are as individuals has so much of a longer history that we could look back into, especially when we look back, in the formation of different groups and organizations. As early as back in like the 20s, I think, when I, was doing some research of a group that was formed in Chicago for the sole purpose of, fighting for our pride, if you will, fighting for who we are as individuals so that we can live authentically and be able to thrive and be successful. And so, while I look at Pride as in the physical marching aspect of it and the physical coming together as a community, I think even more so now it's more important that we look at it from the holistic perspective of Pride is so much more than that, and we have to take root in that and take root in our history so that we can move forward in a way that we will continue to say that Pride is existent, Pride is here, Pride is not canceled by any means.
Absolutely, we embody pride. So, Robert, you already got into why celebrating pride is important, but Dr. Stone, do you have anything more to say about the importance of continuing to celebrate, or maybe celebrate isn't always the right word for everybody, but honor pride?
I think that we live in a society where sometimes when we talk about LGBTQ issues and people, we talk about it in terms of like tolerance or diversity, right? Sort of allowing, giving rights, kind of this language that's very like, well, you can have your way and I'll have my way, right? There's some value to that sometimes. But to be prideful is to say that we are worthy of celebrating, right? We should celebrate ourselves, right? That we are magnificent people and we have a really exciting and thriving culture and the things we love and do are valuable. And so for me, when I think about pride, I think about really embracing both all of the aspects of myself, right? And also all of the aspects of the community. So sometimes when I hear people saying like at pride events, oh, we shouldn't let this group in because like, like they're just not quite as like sort of well put together, as the rest of us. Like all parts of our community are welcome at Pride, right? And should come to Pride. So I think it's about sort of valuing and celebrating ourselves and the community, not just tolerating, not just talking about it in terms of diversity, right? But genuine celebration.
I think that's important, Amy, that you brought that up, because I think I see that over the many, many years that I've been working within Pride circuits and Pride organizations and LGBT organizations, is that there's a sense of this big, bad, ugly word that we have out there is heteronormativity. We live in a heteronormative society already. And I think because so many people within our own communities have been oppressed and have felt it in different ways, that they then start to conform and decide what is acceptable and what's not acceptable so that they can then be accepted by others. And, and what happens then is that we continue to exclude people from our own communities, that we, and I use we very broad, that we don't feel that are part of it, or shouldn't be part of it, because what if there's kids around, or what if there's this? And the thing is that we have to embrace our whole community. If there's one thing I haven't learned in all the work that I've done, is that we can't experience liberation for one group if we're not going to experience liberation for all. And that goes the same, many of our groups within our community, I think, can attest to that at one point or another that they've felt ostracized or even pushed aside and cast aside by our own community. And I think that's one of the things that we have to really focus on, is that if we are going to win this overall big fight of having equality and being treated with respect and dignity, is that we have to treat our own community with that same respect and dignity. Our community is not immune to it. The structural racism and the systematic racism that is in place, we're all touched by it. We all feel it at one point or another. And it's up to us to recognize when we're touched by it, but then it's also up to us to recognize when we're passing that on forward, and then affecting other people with it. And so, it's a much larger conversation about pride and about our community, and how do we come together to work as one, so that we don't have anybody from our community feel ostracized or feel oppressed or feel that they cannot be part of something, because somebody told them at one point or another that they weren't part of it. And that is something I think that is, I think has happened over a course of many years, over the evolution of our prides and our history. But it's one of those deep wounds that need to be healed. And I think with a lot of healing, that a lot of these injustices that we're discovering, some people for the very first time, and some people even more, would be able to look at those and say, this is not right. We need to fix this within our own community.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Robert, and I think that we should get into it more explicitly. I don't think it's really clear to people the connection between racial justice and LGBTQ rights, but I think that today, how do we connect LGBTQ rights and advancements to the racial justice movement? Yeah. that has gone on in the past and continues to go on today.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. And on there, I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, whether it's something that is on the conscious level or on the subconscious level, you know, there are some things that are being done individually, organizationally, and otherwise that people are just not aware that it's happening. And when I say it's not aware, it's because they're either not being told that things like that are happening, or they're just not recognizing it for themselves, because kind of that we've always done it this way, why does it need change type mentality. You know, when we talk about, you know, when I just mentioned a little bit ago about, you know, racism, you know, touching every single person, and what do we do with the racism that is received to us? Do we pass that on further to other people? You know, are we by these, you know, anti-Blackness type situations that are occurring, are those things that picked up along the way and we didn't realize that they were anti-Black, and they've somehow been embedded into organizational policies and organizational culture. You know, it's really having to do a self-assessment. And again, I speak from a broader, whether that's, you know, self as you, or self as an organization, or self as a business, but really doing a self-assessment. What are our policies? What are our values? What are our true beliefs? Like, how do we operate? And are there any anti-racist or anti-Black policies that are in place? Are there barriers that we are purposely putting in play into play that are going to keep people from advancing forward? You know, are there things in place that are actively keeping people from serving on boards and commissions? Are there things that are actively in place that keep certain people, whether because it's for their socioeconomic status, the color of their skin, whatever that might be, what are those things that are in place that are been systematic, things that we don't even realize that are in the books at this point? What are those things, and how do we get those to be stripped out? And I think we each play a responsibility when it comes with any organization, regardless of what level we are within the organization, that we make sure that we continually review those and continually look at things and say, how can we do better? What can we do to make things better?
Yeah.
I feel like when I sometimes hear people talk about like the LGBTQ movement and racial justice, and sometimes they talk about it as if everyone who is LGBTQ is white, which I think is an old ideological thing in our community. This is a little bit tangential to what Robert was talking about, but it ignores the fact that some of the most vulnerable people in the LGBTQ community are LGBTQ people of color. Like so we work together, the three of us, for transparency here, on a group called Strengthening Colors of Pride. Last year we did a huge survey of almost 2,000 people in San Antonio and surrounding counties here in Texas. And even just if we talk about one thing that we surveyed on, homelessness, right? Homelessness is a serious threat to people's health and safety and well-being. To not have a safe place to be, I can't imagine what it feels like to not have a safe place to be right now in the middle of this, you know, pandemic. We found that 1 in 5 LGBTQ people in San Antonio have experienced homelessness, right? On the surface, you might be like, well, that's, you know, sort of like some homophobia, that's transphobia, that's kind of making that happen. A lot of people get turned out by their families, right? Or maybe it's hard to find a job, right? There's all these things that contribute to whether or not we're homeless. But if we look at it in terms of for Black and Latinx LGBTQ people in San Antonio, that number turns into 1 in 3 people. 1 in 3 people have been homeless at some point, right? So that's a combination of both homophobia and transphobia and racism, right? Impacting people in a really serious way. So I think we have to be invested in racial justice to be invested in LGBTQ rights. Like, we can't separate these two things out. They are intricately combined in terms of how people experience their lives and how we can fight something like homelessness, right? We can't just talk about sexuality. We have to talk about race.
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, because it's interesting that when we, and and I speak of directly of the LGBT community itself because, you know, that's the community I work with most closely. But I remember during the 2017 legislative session when we were fighting SB4, it was a show your papers, you know, law that, you know, that was passed, unfortunately. And folks from the LGBT community were asking, what does this have to do with the LGBT community? And it was, I think that was really one of the first times that I just kind of took a step back and really thought, wow, it's not obvious. Like, to me, it was obvious how, you know, where the intersections were, but to the people that were asking this, they certainly didn't see it. And having to break it down and basically look at and let them know, you know, one, LGBTQ people are parts of all fabrics of life. We are part of all racial and ethnic makeups. We're part of every socioeconomic group. We're part of every way that you can slice it and cut it. We're part of that group. You know, we're everywhere. And then as we have the issues that are happening currently with Black Lives Matters, I see that coming up again. What does BLM have to do with LGBTQ? And again, having to have this discussion of, and that, again, that, oh my God, are you serious? That, you know, they very much intertwine with one another. You know, again, going back to like, we're part of every fabric of life, and we're like, point of like, to hope, in hopes that it in of itself would help explain. But it goes so much deeper than that as to why we, you know, have to approach things in an intersectional way. You know, of all the oppression that's happening in our country, and really throughout the world for that matter, are to marginalized groups. And I think that the biggest thing of the oppressor is to keep us divided. And I think that's the one way that we can overcome the challenges that that are being experienced, is for all these marginalized groups to come together, including our allies, and to say, you know, this is why it matters. These people are our people, we are them, they are us. And seeing us as, you know, who we are and what we have in common, more so than what we have that's different. I think if we focus more on our commonalities in the world, I've always said I think we'd be in a far better position than we are now. You know, and hopefully one day we will get there. But I think, you know, just continuing to push forward the stories of the individuals, you know, that fall into those intersections of being both queer and Black and a woman and a lesbian, and you know whatever, you know, they have, that people start to see the complexities of the individuals that are in multiple communities. And you know, it's just not a black and white. It's not just a male and female. It's not just like, life is so much more complex. And if we start breaking it down and looking at people again as humans, number one, and then two, as, you know, these are the intersections that we all see every day, the other people that we work with, and it matters. You know, their voices matter, and that's why, as a, you know, queer Latin man, like, I stand up for Black Lives Matter. I'm stand up for a lot of different groups and whatnot, because at the end of the day, you know, I know that they're going to stand with us when we need them. And so I think it's important that people understand why those intersections are so important to us as a movement.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the word you used earlier, I think, is an important one to echo, is anti-racist. You know, when we talk about not being racist, I think that's the bare minimum, you know? And I think that if you have an LGBTQ identity, you may think that it may not be important to not, you know, it's okay to just be not racist. But I think that being anti-racist in the way that you guys both describe is it's just critical.
Yeah. Just to add to that, Ryan, because I think that is important, because I think oftentimes when we use, it's the language that we use and how people perceive it, and how people take it. And so, you know, I've also heard where folks, you know, like, I can't be racist because I'm a person of color. Okay, well, stop being anti-Black then.
Yeah.
Let's
spell it out.
Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
And it's doing it in a way where we're educating people along the way as well. Because it's unfortunate, but these are some conversations that people have not had yet. Whether because they were uncomfortable in having them or if there were other reasons. But the time is now. The time is now to do this.
When I teach about race in the classroom, I often remind students that they can be very preoccupied with trying to figure out or trying to defend themselves from being seen as racist, right? They put a lot of action into that. But really, racism is in the air around us. Like, unless you were born with a gas mask on, like, you've been breathing it in for like at least 20 years, right? So that's something that is in your mind already. It is there, right? And so we all need to work on that. But a better starting place is like, what can I do to make this better? Rather than worrying about how other people see me. What can I do? What actions can I take to make this thing better? I try to emphasize starting from that place of understanding racism rather than too much preoccupation with whether or not other people will see me as racist, right? Because we don't want people to see us poorly. So I think it's very complicated.
We've had, in recent years and recent weeks, we've had some legal advancements for the LGBTQ community. People talk about marriage equality, and they talk about, banning workplace discrimination for LGBTQ people. And so I think that perhaps a conversation that comes with those advancements is, what else do you need? Don't you have it all? You can get married to who you love. You can work where you want. Why is it still important to fight for LGBTQ rights? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. So when marriage equality happened in 2015, actually today, 5 years ago, marriage equality was brought from SCOTUS as a decision that, that all people have the legal right to marry across the U.S. And it was a historic time. It certainly was a great cause for celebration. But what we found is that both folks from our community and people outside of our community thought that was the end all be all. They got all the rights and everything's good from here and here's good to go. And that certainly wasn't the case. There were still comprehensive non-discrimination laws that were still needed, from preventing you from being fired from your job, for being LGBTQ or being perceived as LGBTQ, being able to be evicted or kicked out of your home, being kicked out of a public space. Just to give a few examples of laws that were still out there or were not out there. Fast forward to this June, SCOTUS released that the definition of sex includes sexual orientation and gender identity. It's a huge win. Again, it's a huge accomplishment towards employment discrimination. But it, again, doesn't solve everything. There are still many things that still need to be won. On the front of discrimination, when we talk about public accommodations, the employment portion of that only covers X amount of workers because of employment restrictions that are put on the law itself. The size of employer, how many people they employ, things like that. So there's a lot of work to be done still. So we are far from over from it. There are still a lot of work to be done. As we saw with the week, excuse me, or the days prior to the SCOTUS decision, there was the HHS ruling, and for healthcare and our trans community. Even after SCOTUS made their decision based on employment, the Trump administration still supported additional laws that would further limit healthcare and other issues for the trans community. It's looking at things like that that show us that we're not done. The unfortunate reality is that we have people that are actively working against our community to negatively impact our community. And so we'll continue to work and do what we need to do. But until we get into a position where we can work as as offense on the field, if you will, versus defense, there's not much that we can do when our energy is so tied up in trying to beat back the negative that is trying to be pushed upon our community. And that's just speaking from like the legalities of discrimination. I mean, there's so many other things when we talk about recognition of family and the safety of our youth and the safety of our trans siblings, and the list goes on of different things that need to be done for us to have what we would consider full lived equality. So that's within the work that I do, we are actively trying to work ourselves out of work. It's unfortunate that I don't see that happening anytime soon. But when the day comes, boy, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
Just to piggyback on what Robert's talking about a little bit, like there are gains that are necessary for like happiness and wellness that are not necessarily tied up in the law. Being loved and supported by your community. Right? So going back to the example of homelessness, if you can't get a job because you're LGBTQ, or struggling to get a job because you're LGBTQ, some of that is about the law, right? It's because you have to be able to prove that there's discrimination. And some of that is about like people having negative attitudes towards LGBTQ people, right? So, and things like, well, I'm homeless because my family doesn't accept me, right? We can't make a law against that necessarily. But the more people are loving and accepting, particularly those closest to themselves, the better off our wellness is, right? So it's very complicated, this mixture of both rights and sort of like public opinion and support, kind of working together to improve LGBTQ life.
Do you believe that the two coincide often, social and legal rights, that perhaps as we gain, legal advancements, that people become more accepting and more prone to,
I think
I would actually venture to say it's reversed. It's actually reversed on there from like, especially if we look at pollings and how folks are talking about, I'm talking a lot about non-discrimination right now because obviously that's, on the forefront of things right now. But the Kaiser Family Foundation poll just released some numbers off of, and then they're huge numbers really. And I'm looking at it right now and I'll just read it verbatim of what it says. So it says, large majorities, including Republicans, oppose discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people by employers and healthcare providers. And so it goes into the numbers. So it says 9 in 10 Americans, including 7 out of 10 Republicans, say it should be illegal for healthcare providers to refuse to treat people because they are LGBTQ. Nearly 70% support laws that ban discrimination. And so these numbers show that based on kind of what our politics are and what we see happening in the state houses, don't necessarily reflect what citizens believe or what the residents believe. I think, I'm probably be preaching to the choir saying that y'all both know that lawmakers have their own agenda as to what they want to push through and don't always listen to their constituents. That's just, it's an unfortunate reality. But what we have seen over the course, even going back as far as marriage equality, speaking about, there was a study showing that 64% of Hispanic households supported marriage equality. And that's a big number for a Hispanic population who is considered to be predominantly Catholic in religion. But the thing is the overarching was family. They loved and supported their family. But we see that over and over again throughout the years of these polls that represent the numbers to show that community, whether they are Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, regardless of their racial and ethnic makeup, support LGBTQ people. And I think if we were ever at a point where we would be able to pass laws based on what we actually see as being pulled from what constituents want versus what politicians want, we would see a whole different tide happening across the LGBTQ movement.
Absolutely. So we had a question that came in actually, and it is relevant and important. But can we talk a little bit about the ways that allies for the LGBTQ community can do so in a productive and positive way? Yeah, how can they stand alongside their LGBTQ siblings?
There's so many things they can do. I think it's important, in terms of any kind of allyship, is to educate yourself a bit, right? Going into kind of wanting to be a stronger ally, because you don't always want to lean on LGBTQ people in your life to basically teach you all of the things you need to know, right? So it could be good to watch some documentaries about LGBTQ history, or to read some books written by LGBTQ authors, right? To understand more. I think we all could use that exposure. So I think that's one really important part, is like learning on your own a little bit, rather than leaning on the people around you to do that work for you.
I think another huge way that allies can step up and insert themselves in the movement is by advocating on behalf of their loved ones, or the folks that are LGBTQ. And what I mean by advocating is stepping into that role of contacting your legislators, contacting your elected officials, finding out their positions on LGBTQ topics. What is their voting history? What has been their history of supporting or non-supporting of our community? And then once you do a little bit of research on who that is, for all levels of your government, from your city, county, state, federal, then start writing letters, making phone calls, doing office visits, become a semi-permanent fixture in their office, where they know who you are on a name-by-name basis, because it's those individuals who truly impact when somebody is on the dais and going to make a vote, rather than, I know that in Texas, there unfortunately are politicians who have said directly to us, like, I don't have any LGBT constituents, which is, I'll just leave it there. But, it's bringing that to the forefront of saying, I'm a constituent of yours and I care about LGBTQ people, or I am a constituent and the person I care about is also a constituent in your community, and it's really trying to educate them and get that kind of knowledge to them. Will it always be receptive? No, not always. But at least giving it an attempt and continuing to try and doing it in different methods, putting together postcard parties with your friends, putting together letter writing campaigns, partnering with other organizations and seeing what you can do from a legislative front. The only way that we can really affect change is if we're out there and letting people know that one, we're watching their vote, two, we're seeing what they're doing, and three, we're voting constituents. And I have the very likelihood not to vote for you if you do not, show compassion or show support for a community that I love. And that's another way that you can certainly get involved year round, regardless if we're in session or not. It's something that can certainly be done from the comfort of your home, from the phone, and then of course during session and doing office visits and whatnot.
I would add too that if you're a parent, if you go to a school, even if your child is not LGBTQ, being aware of whether or not that school's policies and procedures are anti-gay and anti-transgender, right? Whether or not they're supportive of kids at that school. As a parent, you have a really strong voice, to make change at your school. You can join the PTA, you can go to school board meetings, and you're considered to be a constituent of the school in a particular way. So I strongly recommend kind of being vocal and being an advocate, particularly in school settings. LGBTQ children are really vulnerable. They may or may not have supportive parents. They may or may not have supportive teachers and administrators. The dropout rate is pretty high among LGBTQ teens. And there's a school to prison pipeline for LGBTQ teens as well, in which they get bullied at school and they fight back and they end up going to juvenile detention because of it, right? So you can make a difference for those kids, even if they're not your kids.
Yeah. I just want to point out how the ways that both of you talked about being an ally to the LGBTQ community is very similar to how you can be an ally to the Black community as well. So, your points about not exhausting and doing research on your own rather than asking maybe, your Black friends or family, what you can do is important, just to not, and also to speak out and, talk to, as a constituent, talking to your representatives about what you can do for the BLM movement in general. So that's a nice overlap, I think.
Yeah, I think, and thank you for that question. I think it's always important for somebody to ask, what can we do? And I would ask you to mirror that question back to any LGBTQ folks that you have in your life, or your friends or family that are LGBTQ, and mirror that question to them and ask them, how can you be supportive of them, and listen. And I think that if that's the only thing that you were to do, I think that's probably your best start, is just those that are closest to you that that are LGBTQ is like, how can I help you? Because we're very much in that position right now where they will be your best resource, and the way that you approach it of saying, how can I help you, versus, what can I do? Or, just it kind of it empowers them to know that you are truly there to be an ally, and I can almost guarantee that they'll have some answers for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're nearing the end of our questions, really. I think that it's important to touch on. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Stone.
Keep going.
I think that it's important to talk about, we've talked about so much how COVID has affected us all, personally, as a community level. But can we talk about explicitly how COVID has impacted the LGBTQ community?
So we're still getting the numbers on the impact on the LGBTQ community, but going into the COVID crisis, the LGBTQ community already was facing real differences in terms of unemployment, so like a higher unemployment rate already going into the COVID crisis, and also healthcare provision. So we did the survey of LGBTQ people in San Antonio. We're going to talk about it at our town hall next week on Tuesday night at 7:00. You can find more information on our Strengthening Colors of Pride Facebook group or our website. So we're already kind of coming into this crisis with less access to healthcare and adequate healthcare and underemployment, right? And unemployment. So my concern is that COVID has really exacerbated both of those things, made them worse. Additionally, I know that for many of my college students who are LGBTQ, they went from living on a college campus, right, to returning home to their families. And I think sometimes the way that teachers and administrators, both in public schools and in college, talk about sending children home as sending them home to someplace safe. But the home might not be safe, or it may not be comfortable, right? So I kind of worry about the vulnerability of people who are doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is sheltering in place, but doing so with family members who are anti-LGBTQ. So those are my concerns.
Yeah, I would echo what Amy said, and I just, from the center's perspective, I mean, we immediately launched a LGBTQ emergency fund because we had a high rate of our community members that were reaching out that were finding themselves in crisis, either because they had already been unemployed, as Amy had mentioned, or were experiencing some other type of crisis that was already happening. And so we were able to launch the emergency fund, and to date we've been able to offer over 60 folks assistance throughout the community, financial support, and you know, and really, honestly, it's Band-Aid. It's just for us something that we can do as a temporary fix until we are able to find other services that are available in the city or county. But the reality of it is because the entire city and entire county was experiencing these same types of issues, is that programs and services were tapped out pretty quickly. And so we still find people that are still finding themselves in situations. And I anticipate that we will probably find ourselves back in a very similar situation to where we first were with the service industry closing, just as that was announced today. We have a lot of folks within the LGBT community who work in the service industry. So that directly impacts their jobs as servers or as bartenders and bar staff. And, you know, so it's one of those things where until we really get a grip on the COVID numbers and getting them decreased in an effective way, that's not just, again, not a Band-Aid, but like a true fix, you know, we'll continue to see the impacts to our community directly, but really to impacts to the entire, you know, nation.
Yeah, those are the end of our questions. If you guys want to hit on anything else that we somehow missed, I think we've talked about a lot, but is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we wrap up?
No, thank you, Ryan, for moderating for us. You know, it's a great conversation, and apologize for the being under the weather a little bit. So hopefully I didn't come across too crazy or drowsy. But certainly, as Amy had mentioned, we'll be having our town hall on Tuesday at 7 p.m. It'll be on Facebook Live. So you can either join directly from the Strengthening Colors of Pride Facebook page, or from the Pride Center Facebook page as well. But there is a Facebook event page out there that you can pre-register, and we'll send you additional instructions on how to link for Tuesday. But we'll have a more in-depth conversation that Amy will go over with the report findings from our summer report, and then going into talking with some of our local leaders, with other community groups, to talk about how this all impacts us here directly, and how we can move forward to be a more healthier community.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to talking to y'all again some more there.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks for a great conversation, you two.